Hello and welcome to Mindset Mondays with DTK. This is episode number 145 in an ongoing series of live broadcasts designed for folk with a growth mindset or folk who'd like to develop one. This series is for folk who are committed to getting better at being who they be, who they are at their core. And they're not just distracted by getting better at doing what they do. They already know that the latter is a natural outcome of the former. So, if you'll take just a moment, real quick, before we get started, and grab the link below and click share so you can invite your friends, your colleagues, your community to join the conversation. The more folk we have, the richer the conversation. So, we've got Thanksgiving in the US behind us, or Thanksgiving as it were. Um, and it's interesting, I noticed how these last couple of days have been filled with, starting Tuesday, forget it, all week. For me, it really was all week because the week has been filled with lots of details, lots of moving pieces, lots of machinations. One kid driving into Atlanta, one kid flying into Atlanta and dealing with what the repercussions are for safety and testing. We had COVID screenings. Good God, jockeying for space in the refrigerator. I know I was only cooking for 5 people. It feels like I was still cooking for an army, which may be because I don't think I know how to cook for a small number of people. We had a panicked oven cleaning on Tuesday because it started smoking because something had dripped in it. Last minute work projects that I was jamming in on Tuesday and even Wednesday during prep. My God, it felt like a lower key Thanksgiving was being overrun with lots of other details that didn't care that this was lower key. And all this for 5 people. Um, and what I noticed and what I shared at the very beginning of this is that I don't hear my heart very well when I'm moving at speed. And what I liken it to is riding on a bike with a group of folk. When we're going, the faster we're going, the harder it is to hear people that I'm riding with, even if they're right next to me. Because the wind going past the helmet and going past the straps on the helmet, and given today's temperature, if I have earmuffs, if I have something covering my ears, the faster I'm going, the harder it is to hear. And I think that's true when it comes not just to hearing voices that are out loud, but hearing my heart, hearing what's true for me. Right? Even a few days of fabulous conversations last week where we started talking about, even on Monday last week, talking about gratitude and being present to the gifts of the moment. I still found myself caught up in the swirl of the day. And once again, I was buried in human doing mode, right? And that brings me to what we're playing with today. Give me just a moment. I'm trying to get back to. I'm still learning this new platform, so it's going to be a little entertaining while I do to try to share the screen. And I'm learning. Application window. Is that it? No, that's not it. So this is fun. I can yammer while I'm doing this. And I think I figured it out. So thank you. Now I've figured it out. So while I'm dealing with sharing, so the quote that we're playing with today is this: you must learn to be still in the midst of activity and to be vibrantly alive in repose. This is Mahatma Gandhi's daughter, Indira Gandhi. She was the prime minister of India. Prime minister, is that the proper term? My goodness. You must learn to be still in the midst of activity and to be vibrantly alive in repose. And that's what came up for me this week. That's really the issue. We are designed, we are wired to be human beings, and yet we have learned to spend most of our time being human doings. And when I'm over calibrated to the doing, when I'm spinning up in all the activity and moving quickly, I find it really hard to master that skill of hearing my heart when I'm moving that fast, to be still in the midst of activity. So I'm taking this week, this flurry, as a powerful reminder to be more intentional, more present, more still in the midst of that activity, to feel the vibrancy deep in the being, finding stillness in the doing and finding the vibrancy in the being. And so I'm curious, as we've come through this Thanksgiving crush, where are you finding most of your time being spent? Where are you calibrating? Are you leaning more into the being? Are you leaning more into the doing? How much of your world is wound up with the activities, and how still are you able to be in that moment of activity? I know, I know how much of my time I spend caught up in the doing. And it's interesting. Where I'm pausing here is trying to figure out what my tell is. How do I know when I'm in doing mode and not being? I think energetically, it's fascinating. I think so. I'm checking in, and what I realize is when I am in being mode, whether it is or not, I feel like my head is up more, right? The signature on my email for the first 8 years as a coach was heart forward and head high. That was actually the name of my original blog. Heart forward and head high. And I think energetically, that's what I feel like when I'm in more of the being mode. When I'm in doing, it feels like I'm like this. I'm head forward, head down a little bit, leaning and leading with my head. I'm in the doing mode. It's almost like I want to be more aerodynamic and tipped forward, which is fascinating. It's the energetically, that's what comes up for me. I am, ah, and I feel that I'm tipped forward. And yet there's room to be still. There's room to be heart forward and head high. There's room to be still even in the midst of activity. Just because there's a flurry of things to do doesn't mean we have to energetically be in a flurry. So what is that about? What is it that gets us out of experiencing the moment, as Charlotte says, and into just doing the moment? What will it take for us to listen to Indira Gandhi and to learn to be still in the midst of the activity? And what is it to be vibrantly alive in the repose? What is it to be exquisitely aware in the moment of being? What would your sage look like when it's in the being? Thank you, Lynn. Lynn's asking me a great question. What would your sage look like when it's in being? And I love the question because it takes us back to that positive intelligence, the energy of the sage, the love-based energy versus the energy of the saboteur, all the fear-based energies in your internal narrative. And so I go back to this guide I have of what the different sage energies are. And it's interesting to go with this quote today that the sage power of activate, the sage energy of activate is the love of forward motion and impact, like the love of getting things done. And I think that's the piece of when the energy is coming from sage, Lynn, it's that's where there's an inherent stillness in it. That in that stillness, in that sage activate, we're able to be still in the midst of activity. Even saying it, even taking that energy in, I feel my pulse come down. I feel my breathing come down. And that's the invitation. There are very few, take a breath. There are very few days until the end of the year. There are 32 days until the new year begins, including today. So slightly less than 32 days. Inevitably and invariably, there will be a ton to get done between now and the end of 2020. And when when 2020 becomes hindsight and we can look behind us and see that 2020 is done, will we be able to look back at these last 31 and a half days and find that we spent it in a flurry of doing, or that we're able to create that stillness and be human beings for the end of this year, to usher it out with intention. So that's what I'm going to hold for the next 30 days, 32 days, is that opportunity to navigate my list and work through all the things to get done and take advantage of the time we have left and find a way to be still in the midst of all the activity that I want to be part of between now and the end of the year. And when I'm not in the doing, to find a way to be vibrantly alive, even in the stillness. It's so easy to shut off, to turn off, to escape, to flip on Netflix, to pour a glass or two of wine. That is not, as Indira Gandhi would implore us to be, being vibrantly alive in repose. That's just being in repose. And wait, there's something to be said for that. And I choose to create space and to carve out space and containers to be in repose and be vibrantly alive, to be aware of the being, to be still and vibrant at the same time. That excites me. I would like to close off the end of this year feeling alive and engaged and connected to myself. So, what will you do to create, to carve out, to set aside time to be in repose, to be intentionally still, and to be vibrantly alive at the same time? I'm excited to hear what you choose to do for the remainder of this year. And as always, I would love for you to come to facebook.com/group/mindset Monday and share what you're experiencing with this and how you're completing your year. Ooh, and also, for those of you who don't already have the book, Mindset Mondays with DTK is on Amazon today for $2.99 for the Kindle and $9.99 for the paperback. I don't usually flagrantly self-promote, yet for Cyber Monday, we've put the book on sale so that more folk can have a tool with which they can be intentional about how they spend 2021. Gives you 52 chapters to work with as a way to, week by week, rewire your thinking and transform your life and make it a more intentional world. So I encourage you to go to Amazon and look up Mindset Mondays with DTK. It's a brilliant client gift, great gift for those in your life who are interested in growth and self-improvement and shifting the world. And it's a great gift for yourself as well. So between now and next week, I invite you to be still in the midst of all the activity, yet vibrantly alive in repose. Thanks, and I'll see you next week.